So today I want to take a look at two different stone types. I want to particularly focus on shape, although in this particular case they are actually different stone types altogether. And then I want to compare what these shapes mean both for breaking and for repair and why it makes such a big difference. So the first stone we're going to look at is green aventurine. In this case, the stone is rounded on the front and flat on the back. So you can see there. When I break these stones, I do turn them over so that I am hitting them on the back side, just so that any marks that are left are on the back rather than on the front of the stone. But even with one side being flat, as I put the chisel on it and then hit the chisel with a hammer, there are only particular places where I can actually set the chisel to hit it so that the force goes into the stone rather than just shooting the stone across the room. And you'll notice most of them, as I set the hammer down, it simply shoots the stone off to the side. So to begin with, finding a place that I can balance the chisel well on the stone and hit it provides limits around what sort of breaking I can get. Although stones are different enough that even two identical stones with the chisel set in the exact same place will not give me necessarily the same break pattern. Now, green aventurine is a relatively softer stone in some ways. It has a very crystalline structure. You can see here with one I have already broken. It tends to give these lines after breaking inside the stone where there are microscopic cracks that don't come through to the surface and don't seem to weaken the stone, at least enough that I can break it with my fingers. But you can see kind of those stress marks within the stone. Also, these edges are very crystalline. I do have to clean them well because this tends to give off very tiny sand-like particles as I rub it, which can interfere with good adhesion when I add the repair compound. You can see a little bit of that still coming off. As I put the stone back together, I have four main pieces that survived, and you can see here in the center there was an area that just crumbled, where the pieces I got from it were so small that I wasn't able to actually collect them and work with them. But as I look at how it's put back together, it's fairly easy to set it here, just like a jigsaw puzzle. I put the pieces back where they need to be. As I do the repair, it's the same thing. As it hardens, it can just sit there, harden as it is with that flat surface down on the countertop. It will probably take numerous times of filling it because as the repair compound hardens, it tends to shrink a little bit, leaving dents and gaps in big holes like that. And so I frequently have to go back and keep cleaning the surface well, adding more compound until I can build it up to the surface of the stone. But overall, this one's fairly easy to put back together, and then the repair is fairly easy as well. A second type of stone I commonly use, this particular one is Brachydia jasper, but I have different ones of this style where they're equally rounded on both sides, as you can see here. And instead of gluing a bail on the flat back as I do with the green aventurine type, I instead use a head pin that I insert through a hole through the center of the stone. And then this wire from the head pin gets curled around into a loop that is what then can attach it to either a cord or a chain or whatever turns it into a pendant. So as I start by thinking about breaking it, obviously it doesn't matter which side is up or down because there is no clear front or back. I can simply choose one of them. But my challenge with finding a place where the chisel can rest is now doubled because both sides are rounded, both the side that is on the ground and the side that is against the chisel. So this type of stone is very, very difficult to find that perfect balance point where when the hammer hits the chisel, it transfers all of that power into the stone to break it instead of simply shooting it across the room, as you can see I have tried to do multiple times here. even without the, the strength of the hammer blow. In addition, because that balance point is almost always going to in some way cross the center line of the stone, and the center of the stone is weakened due to having this hole drilled through the center, I very, very frequently find stones of this type do give at least one of the break lines coming down through the center of the stone in some way, simply because that is the most likely place for it to break. Now, once I get beyond breaking it, my next challenge then is putting it back together. So this stone also gave 4 primary pieces as well as 2 smaller pieces that were big enough for me to work with, and plenty that were too small to even try. But the challenge in this one is I can't simply set the pieces together and have them sit there. They keep falling back apart. So even in the reassembly process, I have to find some way to hold all of the pieces in place exactly where they need to be at all times, even to try to figure out how the pieces go back together. And that doesn't change when it comes to actually putting the compound in, because it takes overnight up to 24 hours for that to dry. So until it's fully dried, even if I had the repair compound in there, as soon as I would set it down with the repair compound in place, it would do the same thing. So I can't trust gravity like I did with this green aventurine one to simply set it down and let it harden in place. One like this, I have to find some way to prop it up, lean it on something, put supports in place to make it actually stay where it needs to stay as it hardens. In addition, I constantly have to keep in mind that that channel down through the middle, where that hole was drilled, has to stay open. So that's one more piece that I have to juggle in this, not only in the reassembly, but then as I find some place for it to dry, is that big wire is going to constantly be sticking out the center of it. And that has to be accommodated in wherever I put it to let it dry. So in this particular case, I do know where these last 2 pieces go. I'm not going to try to put those together on film. But you can see this is much, much, much more challenging, even to figure out where all the pieces go, because of the challenge of trying to hold things in place as I'm trying to fit them together. But also for the hardening, where I can't simply let them sit where they need to go, as I did with the green aventurine. So that lack of foundation, lack of a solid, flat foundation, provides multiple challenges in stones of this type. Although they're lovely when they're done with the nicely rounded both sides, it really does make both the reassembly and the actual repair itself, holding it together long enough for it to harden, a significant challenge that I don't have in these that have that foundation of a solid back to allow me to put them together.